For a long time, I believed silence was strength, that if I stayed calm, stayed kind, stayed useful in the quiet ways, my place in the family would always be secure. I didn't need praise. I didn't need attention. I only needed to belong. From the outside, our life looked ordinary, almost ideal. A quiet suburban house, trimmed hedges, a steady routine built over decades. Neighbors waved. Holidays came and went. Nothing looked broken. But inside those walls, something had been slowly eroding for years. And I didn't realize how deep the damage went until it was too late. My husband, Robert, was the center of everything. He made decisions easily. People listened when he spoke. Even at home, his voice carried weight. I never resented that. I supported him the way I thought a good wife should, handling the details, smoothing the edges, making sure life ran quietly in the background. He used to tell me I was the glue holding everything together. I believed him. Our son Daniel grew up watching that balance. As a child, he adored me. He ran to me when he was scared, trusted my judgment without question, believed I could fix anything. But as he got older, that trust slowly changed into tolerance, and then into something colder. He became ambitious, sharp, confident. Everything I was not at first. It was subtle. He interrupted me when I spoke. He dismissed my opinions with a smile. He acted as if my world was too small to matter. I told myself it was normal. Children grow up. They outgrow their parents. That's what I thought this was. But it wasn't just growing up, it was replacement. I became background noise in my own home. Someone who cooked, cleaned, and stayed out of the way while important conversations happened elsewhere. Daniel spoke to his father about money, investments, futures. When I entered the room, the conversation stopped or shifted into something simpler. Something I wouldn't struggle to understand. I noticed. I just didn't protest. Then Robert got sick. The illness came quietly, without warning, and it changed everything. Suddenly, the strong man who had always handled life was fragile. Decisions fell to others. Silence stretched longer than comfort allowed. And in those months, I learned something painful. Daniel wasn't afraid of losing his father. He was afraid of losing control. When Robert passed away, the house felt hollow. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy. Daniel came by often, but his concern felt measured, practical. He talked about documents, accounts, responsibilities. He didn't ask how I was sleeping. He didn't ask how I was coping. He assumed. I would fade into the background completely. And I let him believe that because at that point, I still didn't understand what was coming. I still thought love would protect me. I still believed I knew my place. I didn't know that everything I thought was settled was about to be tested in one single room. Respect doesn't disappear all at once, it fades slowly. In moments so small you convince yourself they don't matter. After Robert's funeral, people told me I was strong. They said it the way people say things when they don't know what else to say. I nodded, thanked them, and returned to a house that no longer felt like mine. Every room carried echoes of a life that had ended. And I moved through it like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Daniel began coming over more often. But his presence felt different now. He walked through the house with purpose, opening drawers, checking cabinets, glancing at paperwork on the desk as if he were already taking inventory. He didn't ask before doing it. He didn't need to. In his mind, this place already belonged to him. At first, I tried to stay involved. I asked questions. I offered suggestions. Small things, what to do with certain accounts, whether to keep the house, how to handle the business matters Robert had left behind. Daniel listened just long enough to appear polite, then brushed my words aside. "You don't need to worry about that," he'd say. "I'll handle it." The way he said it wasn't comforting. It was dismissive when I reminded him that I had managed this household for decades. He smiled like a patient adult, humoring a confused child. "That's different," he replied. "This is more complicated." Complicated. Another word that quietly erased me. The moments of disrespect became more obvious over time. Daniel corrected me in front of others. He spoke over me mid-sentence. He rolled his eyes when I asked questions he deemed unnecessary. Once, during a conversation with his colleagues over speakerphone, he muted the call and whispered, "You wouldn't understand this anyway." That one stayed with me. I stopped offering opinions after that. Not because I had none, but because I was tired of watching them die in the air between us. Silence felt safer, less humiliating. One afternoon, as we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once helped him with homework and listened to his childhood fears, Daniel finally stopped pretending. "You know," said, scrolling through his phone, "Dad really carried everything. The finances, the planning, the real responsibilities." I looked at him, surprised by the bluntness. "We shared responsibilities," I said carefully. He laughed. Not cruelly, casually. "Mom, let's be honest. You handled the house. Dad handled the important stuff." The word important hung between us like a verdict. I supported him, I said. "That matters." Daniel sighed, clearly annoyed now. "Emotionally, sure. But practically, you wouldn't even know where to start with any of this." I felt my chest tighten. "I've been managing life longer than you've been alive." He finally looked at me then, irritation written clearly across his face. "Managing life isn't the same as managing assets. I mean, no offense, but you're not exactly useful when it comes to decisions like these." Useless. The word landed harder than anything else he'd said. Not because it was new, but because it confirmed what I had felt for years. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just stared at the table, tracing the worn edges with my fingers. This was the moment respect truly died, not in anger, but in certainty. Daniel wasn't speaking out of frustration. He believed what he was saying, and worse. He believed I believed it too. That night, I lay awake, replaying the conversation again and again. I questioned myself, my worth, my role. I wondered when I had become so easy to dismiss. I wondered if I had helped create this version of him by staying silent for so long. A few days later, Daniel mentioned the lawyer. "Mr. Harris has scheduled the will reading," he said. "It's just a formality." Formality. That word told me everything. In Daniel's mind, the future was already decided. He had no doubt about where the power would land, who would be trusted, who would be left behind. And as I nodded quietly, agreeing to the appointment, a strange feeling settled in my chest. Not anger, not hope, just the sense that something was about to break or finally be revealed. Asterisk exact word count. 459 words. The morning of the will reading arrived colder than expected. Not just in temperature, but in feeling. I woke before dawn, lying still in a bed that suddenly felt too large, listening to the house breathe around me. Every sound echoed. Every memory felt sharper, heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that wouldn't draw attention. I wasn't trying to look powerful or confident. I just wanted to disappear as quietly as possible. Daniel, on the other hand, arrived dressed like he was headed to a board meeting. Crisp suit, polished shoes. The uniform of someone who believed the future already belonged to him. The drive to the lawyer's office was silent. Daniel focused on the road, fingers tapping the steering wheel with impatience. I watched familiar streets pass by, wondering how a single piece of paper could decide the value of an entire life. My life, his life, Robert's life. The office building stood tall and impersonal, all glass and steel. Inside, everything smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. The waiting room was quiet, too quiet, as if sound itself wasn't welcome there. We sat side by side, but miles apart. Daniel checked his watch. I folded my hands to keep them from shaking. When Mr. Harris finally called us in, my heart began to race. The office was neat, orderly, and cold. Framed certificates lined the walls, silent witnesses to decisions that changed people forever. We took our seats across from the desk. Daniel leaned back comfortably. I sat stiffly, afraid that if I relaxed, I might fall apart. Mr. Harris spoke in a calm, practiced tone. He explained procedures, legal language, and timelines. His words blurred together for me. All I could focus on was the sound of pages turning inside that thick folder. Each page felt like a countdown dot as the reading began. Daniel's confidence was almost visible. He nodded along, occasionally smiling. As assets were mentioned, investments, accounts, properties, everything sounded exactly as he expected. With every sentence, his posture loosened while my chest grew tighter. I told myself not to expect anything. I reminded myself that this meeting was never meant for me. I was here as a formality, a witness. Nothing more than. Mr. Harris paused. The room fell silent in a way that felt intentional. He adjusted his glasses and turned another page, slower this time. Daniel straightened slightly, curiosity replacing certainty. I felt my pulse in my ears. This section, the lawyer said, requires special attention. In that moment, I realized something important. This day wasn't unfolding the way Daniel thought it would. And for the first time since Robert's death, I felt the faintest tremor of uncertainty ripple through the room. Faintest tremor of uncertainty ripple through the room. Confidence is loud when it believes it cannot be challenged. Daniel's certainty filled the room like a performance meant for an audience of one. He leaned forward now, elbows resting on his knees, already preparing questions he expected the lawyer to answer in his favor. To him, this meeting was nothing more than confirmation. Mr. Harris continued reading, his voice steady, measured, almost detached. The words sounded formal, distant, stripped of emotion. Asset after asset was listed, each one reinforcing Daniel's belief that everything had been arranged for him. He nodded occasionally, as if mentally checking items off a list he had already memorized. I barely heard the details. My attention drifted to Daniel's expressions. The confidence, the small, satisfied smile, the way he glanced at me, not with cruelty, but with pity, as if he were already planning where I would fit once everything was settled, or whether I would fit at all. At one point, he leaned closer to me and whispered, "See? Just like I told you." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The lawyer paused again, flipping another page. Daniel didn't notice. He was too busy basking in his own certainty. That was when I understood how deeply confidence can blind a person. When you are convinced of your victory, you stop listening. You stop questioning. You stop imagining any other outcome. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. Before we conclude, he said, there is context attached to these distributions. Daniel waved a hand lightly. That won't be necessary. The lawyer didn't react. It is necessary. That single sentence wiped the smile from Daniel's face. He sat upright, irritation flickering across his expression. The room felt tighter now, as if the walls had moved closer without warning. Mr. Harris continued, explaining that the listed assets were subject to oversight, conditions, and long-term planning. Daniel's jaw tightened. His confidence didn't disappear, but it shifted. It became sharper, defensive. I watched him struggle with that change, and for the first time, I wasn't shrinking. I was observing. The lawyer spoke about responsibility, about intention, about protection rather than possession. Words Daniel hadn't expected to hear. Words he didn't value. Finally, Daniel turned to me, frustration boiling over. This is just legal language, he said. It doesn't change anything. I met his eyes calmly. I didn't argue. I didn't challenge him, but something inside me knew the truth. Confidence had carried him this far. Cruelty had kept him comfortable, and neither would protect him from what was coming next. Asterisk. The shift in the room didn't happen loudly. There was no dramatic movement, no raised voices, no sudden confrontation. It happened in the space between breaths, in the pause that followed Mr. Harris's last sentence. Silence settled over us, heavy and deliberate, as if the room itself was preparing for something it could no longer avoid. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses and turned another page. This time, more slowly than before. The sound of the paper felt louder than it should have been. Daniel leaned back again, attempting to reclaim his confidence, but it didn't sit as naturally on him now. There was tension in his shoulders, impatience in the way his fingers tapped against his knee. This next section, the lawyer said, addresses control rather than distribution. Daniel frowned. Control of what? Mr. Harris didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me, double quotes, Mrs. Thompson. He said calmly, "Would you please come forward?" For a moment, I didn't move. I was certain he had made a mistake. My name didn't belong in this part of the conversation. Daniel turned toward me sharply, disbelief flashing across his face. "What is this?" he asked. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Each step toward the desk felt unreal, like I was walking into someone else's story. Mr. Harris gestured for me to stand beside him, placing a document in front of me. Double quotes, "Mr. Thompson established a family trust," he explained, his voice precise. "While assets are allocated, decision-making authority rests with the trustee." Daniel let out a short laugh. "Fine, then say it." The lawyer met his gaze. "Mrs. Thompson is the trustee." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed with enough weight to change everything. Daniel's smile vanished. "That's not possible," he said. "She doesn't even understand this stuff." Mr. Harris remained composed. "Your father believed she understood responsibility better than anyone." I stared at the paper in front of me, my name printed clearly, undeniably. My hands trembled as realization slowly replaced disbelief. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't symbolic. This was real. Daniel stepped forward, anger rising. "You did this behind my back." I shook my head. "Your father did." The lawyer folded his hands. "All major decisions require Mrs. Thompson's approval, including future distributions." The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. One sentence had done what? Years of silence never could. It had shifted the balance of power completely. The lawyer did not rush. He never did. He explained each line of the document as if patience itself were a requirement of truth. Daniel stood rigid, jaw clenched, while I remained beside the desk. Still unsure whether my legs would support me if I moved, Mr. Harris spoke about intention, about foresight, about protection. He explained that the trust was not created out of punishment, but concern. Robert, he said, worried about what unchecked confidence could become. He worried about speed without wisdom, ambition without restraint, power without empathy. Daniel scoffed quietly, shaking his head. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Dad knew I could handle it." The lawyer nodded once. "He knew you could manage assets," he replied. "He questioned whether you could manage people." That sentence struck harder than any insult. Mr. Harris continued outlining conditions written in Robert's own words. Major financial decisions required my approval. Property sales, investments, and future distributions would pass through my judgment first. Not to control, but to preserve. Not to dominate, but to protect. I listened stunned. Every sentence revealed a side of my husband I hadn't fully understood while he was alive. He had seen more than I realized. He had noticed the dismissals, the impatience, the quiet erosion of respect. And he had trusted me to stand where he no longer could. Daniel's frustration grew louder. He accused the lawyer of manipulation. He accused me of influence. But the document was clear, precise, unmovable. There was no loophole to exploit, no argument to win. When Mr. Harris finished, he slid the final page forward. "Your father wanted this read aloud," he said. He read Robert's closing words slowly. They spoke of balance, of humility, of remembering where strength truly comes from. By the time he finished, the room was silent again. Daniel said nothing, neither did I, because in that moment, finally understood. The will wasn't about money, it was about trust. It wasn't about money, it was about trust. When the lawyer finished speaking, Daniel finally broke. Not with shouting, but with laughter that sounded thin and hollow. He paced the room, running a hand through his hair, trying to regain control that was already slipping away. Pride does not fall quietly. It scrambles, it blames, it reaches for anything that might restore its balance. "This isn't fair," Daniel said, stopping in front of me. "You don't deserve this." You never wanted responsibility. His words were sharp, but underneath them was fear. For the first time, he wasn't speaking down to me. He was pleading upward. I looked at him and saw my child again, stripped of certainty. I didn't ask for it, I said calmly, but your father trusted me with it. The room felt fragile, as if one wrong word could shatter what little restraint remained. Daniel's voice rose. He spoke of years of effort, of ambition, of sacrifices he believed entitled him to control. Each sentence revealed how deeply he measured worth by dominance. When he finished, silence answered him. No one applauded. No one corrected me. The realization hit him slowly. He was no longer the authority in the room. His anger softened into desperation. "Fix this," he whispered. "You can change it." He reached for me, then stopped, unsure of his place. I stepped back. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. "This isn't about winning," I said. "It's about consequences." Saying it felt like reclaiming a voice I had buried for years. Daniel's shoulders slumped. Pride finally gave way to understanding, and understanding hurt more than anger ever could. He turned toward the door, pausing only once. "I didn't think you mattered," he said quietly. "I always did," I replied, and with that he left, carrying the weight of his own collapse. Mr. Harris stood and placed the folder back into his briefcase. He did not congratulate me. He simply nodded as if acknowledging something that had always been true. Then he reached into a drawer and set a small ring of keys on the desk between us. They were ordinary. Dull metal, worn edges, no drama attached to them. Yet when I closed my fingers around them, they felt heavier than anything I had ever held. Not because of what they opened, but because of what they represented. Daniel was already gone. The room felt emptier without his anger filling it. I signed where I was instructed, my name steady, my hand calm. When it was finished, Mr. Harris said softly, "Your husband believed strength did not need to announce itself." The air felt different, clearer. I sat in my car for a long moment, keys resting in my palm, and allowed myself to breathe. I did not feel victorious. I felt responsible. There is a difference. That evening, I walked through my house slowly, not inspecting it, remembering it. Every room held echoes of choices I had made quietly, without applause. I realized then that I had never been weak. I had simply been unseen. Daniel did not call that night, or the next. And for the first time, I did not chase the silence. Some lessons cannot be softened. Some truths must be lived through. I placed the keys on the kitchen table and sat down beside them. Power, I understood now, was not about control. It was about care, about knowing when to hold firm and when to let go. My son thought he'd inherited everything. What he never expected was that the person he overlooked would be trusted to decide what truly mattered, truly mattered.